The knock came at exactly the worst possible moment. My heart slammed against my ribs, so hard I could feel it in my throat, and for one stupid second I forgot how to breathe. I was standing in front of the full-length mirror in my sister's bedroom, wearing her red sundress, and the girl looking back at me was a stranger I did not know how to explain. The knock came again, harder, and I heard my father's voice on the other side of the door, low and flat the way it always got right before he lost his temper.
Arjun, he called.
Are you in there? Why is the door locked? I stared at the girl in the mirror. Her eyes were wide, her lips were trembling, and I could see the faint shine of the lip gloss I had put on 40 minutes ago, back when this was still a joke, back when I still believed I could laugh it off and walk away. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. I had maybe 30 seconds to decide who I was going to be when that door opened. And the worst part, the part that still haunts me every single day, is that I did not know the answer. Because somewhere in those 40 minutes, between the first swipe of mascara and the sound of that knock, the joke had stopped being a joke. The girl in the mirror was real, and I had absolutely no idea what to do with her. Let me back up because you need to understand how this started and how it was never, ever supposed to be a plan. My name is Arjun. I am 24 years old. I work as a graphic designer for a small agency in the city, and up until that afternoon, I would have told you, with complete honesty, that I had never once in my life thought about wearing a dress. I grew up in a normal house with normal rules. My father is a retired bank manager who believes that a man should stand up straight, speak loudly, and never show weakness. My mother is a schoolteacher who spent my whole childhood telling me to sit properly, to stop slouching, to be more careful with my clothes. And my sister, Mira, is the only person in our family who ever made me feel like I could be soft. She is 3 years older than me, and when we were kids she used to let me sit in her room and watch her get ready for weddings and parties, and I remember thinking, even then, that there was something magical about the way a person could change themselves with a little color and a little patience. It started, as most of the best and worst things in my life have started, with Mira's wedding. She was getting married in June, and 2 weeks before the ceremony she called me in a panic. Arjun, she said, I need you. My makeup artist just canceled. I laughed. Mira, I said, I am a graphic designer. I draw logos. I do not do faces. She said, you have good hands, you understand color, you understand symmetry, and you are the only person in this family who does not make me feel like a doll.
Please.
I will pay you. I will love you forever. And so, because I could never say no to her, I said yes. The next Saturday, I sat at her bedroom with 100 little bottles and brushes spread across her desk, watching tutorials on my phone at double speed, trying to learn in one afternoon what makeup artists learn in years. And here is the thing nobody tells you about learning makeup. It is not about the face. It is about the fear. The first time I held an eyeliner pencil, my palm was sweating so badly, I had to wipe it on my jeans. The first time I put foundation on Mira's cheek, I pressed too hard and she laughed and said, easy, it is not a wall, it is a painting. And slowly, hour by hour, I started to understand. Contour is just shadow. Highlight is just light. A face is a canvas, and the brush is just a way of telling a story about who you want to be. By the time the wedding day came, I had done her makeup 3 times in practice, and on the actual morning when I finished and she looked at herself in the mirror and started to cry, I felt something I had never felt before. It was not pride, exactly. It was something quieter. It was the feeling of having created something beautiful out of nothing, of having taken a plain face and a nervous bride and turned her into the woman she had always wanted to be. And I remember thinking in that moment that it would be nice, just once, to feel that way about myself. That thought scared me so much that I pushed it down so deep I did not look at it again for months. But it was there. It was always there. And it came roaring back to the surface the night of the reception, when I was standing at the back of the hall, exhausted and happy, and Mira came over and handed me a small velvet pouch. I opened it. Inside was a tube of lipstick, a deep red, the same shade she had worn when she walked down the aisle. She said, "This is for you, for the best makeup artist I know." I laughed and said, "What am I supposed to do with this?" And she looked at me with those knowing eyes and said, "Whatever you want, Arjun." That is the whole point. Whatever you want. I kept that lipstick in my drawer for 6 weeks without opening it. I told myself I was saving it, that it was a keepsake, that I would never use it. And then one night at 2 in the morning, when the city was quiet and I was alone with my thoughts, I took it out. I locked my door. I stood in front of the mirror. And I twisted the cap open. The smell of it hit me first, sweet and waxy and strange, and my hands were shaking as I brought it to my lips. I had never done this before. But the moment the color touched my mouth, something in my chest unlocked. It was like a door I had been leaning against my whole life had finally given way, and on the other side of it was a room I had never known existed, and it was full of light. I wiped it off immediately. I scrubbed my lips so hard they were raw. I put the lipstick back in the drawer and did not touch it again for 2 weeks. But I could not stop thinking about it. I could not stop thinking about the girl. Because that is the thing, and I need you to understand this. That is the thing nobody tells you. It was not about the lipstick.
It was not about the dress.
It was about the fact that for 30 seconds, I had looked in the mirror and seen a version of myself that was soft and gentle, and I had liked her. I had liked her so much it terrified me. And that is where I was standing when the knock came. That is the girl who was looking back at me in the mirror, wearing Mira's red sundress, with her lip gloss shining and her eyes full of fear. Because the truth is, I did not plan this. I never planned any of this. The dress was a mistake, a stupid impulse, a moment of weakness that got out of hand. But the girl was not a mistake. The girl was always there. And when my father's voice came through the door, sharp and impatient, asking why I had locked myself in my sister's bedroom, I had to make a choice that would change everything. I could open the door as Arjun, the good son, the normal son, the man who had never once in his life thought about wearing a dress. Or I could open the door as someone else entirely. And the scariest part of all is that for a full 10 seconds, I genuinely did not know which one I was anymore. I opened the door as Arjun. Of course I did. I was not brave back then, not yet, not even close. I pulled the dress over my head so fast, I almost tore the strap, shoved it under Mira's pillow, wiped my mouth with the back of my hand, and unlocked the door with the kind of calm that only comes from pure, screaming terror. My father was standing in the hallway, with his arms crossed, and his keys in his hand. "What were you doing in there?" he asked. I said, "Mira asked me to find her phone charger." He looked at me for a long moment, and I could feel the lip gloss still shining on my lips, could feel the ghost of the dress still pressed against my skin, and I was absolutely certain he could see it, certain he could smell it, certain that any second now the whole world would know what I had done. But he just grunted, said something about dinner, and walked away. And I stood there in the hallway, shaking, and I realized 2 things at the same time. The first was that I had never been so terrified in my entire life. And the second was that I had never felt so alive. That is the moment I want you to remember, because it is the moment everything changed. It was not the mirror. It was not the dress. It was the moment I realized that the fear and the excitement were the same feeling, and that I had been running from it my whole life for no reason at all. I went home that night, and I could not sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and I replayed the whole thing over and over. The weight of the dress, the shine of the gloss, the look in my own eyes in the mirror. And by 4 in the morning I had made a decision. I was going to do it again.
Properly.
And I was going to learn how to do it right. Here is what I did not know back then, and here is what I want to tell you now, because I wish someone had told me. Crossdressing is not a phase, and it is not a fetish, and it is not a joke. It is a way of exploring a part of yourself that the world tells you to hide. And the people who do it well, the people who look effortless and beautiful and confident, they did not get there by accident. They got there by practice, by patience, and by learning to love the process of becoming. So, I started the way anyone starts anything, badly and in secret and with a lot of YouTube tutorials. I bought my first foundation from a pharmacy 3 suburbs away from my apartment, in cash, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses like I was committing a crime. I bought a cheap wig online and had it delivered to a parcel locker so my roommate would never see it. And I locked myself in my bathroom at midnight, and I started to learn. And let me tell you the truth about learning makeup as a man. The first time I put foundation on my own face, I looked like a ghost. I had no idea what shade I had no idea how to blend, and I had this thick, cakey mask on my skin that made me look like I had been dipped in paint. I wanted to throw everything away. But I had learned something from doing Mira's wedding makeup. You do not judge a painting halfway through. You keep going. So I kept going. I learned that your foundation shade is not your jaw. It is your neck. I learned that you blend downward, never up, and that a damp sponge is your best friend. I learned that concealer is not for hiding, it is for sculpting, and that a little highlight on the cheekbones can change the whole shape of a face. I learned that eyebrows are the frame of the face, and that cleaning them up, even just a little, does more for femininity than any amount of lipstick. And I learned, slowly, painfully, that the mirror is not your enemy. The mirror is your teacher. You just have to be brave enough to keep looking. The wig was the hardest part. I remember the first time I put it on, this cheap, shiny black thing that looked like a Halloween costume, and I looked at myself and I thought, this is a disaster. This is a man in a wig. This is the stupidest thing I have ever done. But I did not give up. I learned that cheap wigs look cheap because of the shine and the parting, and that you can fix both with a little dry shampoo and a little patience. I learned that you should never buy a wig in a color that is not natural to you, because too dark or too light reads as costume. I learned that the hairline is everything, and that a little lace, a little plucking, a little powder can make the difference between a wig and a hairstyle. And I learned, most importantly, that the face under the wig is still yours. The wig does not make you a woman. It just gives you permission to see yourself differently. And then there was the voice. Oh, the voice. Nobody talks about the voice, and it is the hardest part of all. My natural voice is deep, the kind that comes from the chest, the kind my father was proud of. When I first tried to pitch it up, to make it lighter, I sounded like a cartoon, like I was mocking women, which was the last thing I wanted to do. So I learned the real way. I learned that femininity in a voice is not about pitch. It is about placement. It is about speaking from the front of the mouth instead of the back of the throat. It is about softening the consonants, lengthening the vowels, and letting the air do the work instead of the chest. I practiced in the shower, where nobody could hear me. I practiced in my car, on the way to work. I practiced saying the same sentence over and over until it stopped sounding like an imitation and started sounding like me. And one day, about 3 months in, I said something out loud, and I did not recognize my own voice, and I cried. Not because I was sad. Because I had found a part of myself I did not know existed, and she was beautiful.
The roommate, though.
The roommate was a problem. His name is Vikram, and he is a good guy. A loud, friendly, gym-obsessed guy who would never in a million years suspect that his quiet roommate spends his nights learning to contour his jawline. But secrets have a way of leaking out. And the night it almost happened, the night that nearly ended everything, is the night I still get cold sweats thinking about. It was a Friday. Vikram had gone out with his friends, and I thought I had the whole apartment to myself. I had just done my full face for the first time, the whole thing, foundation, contour, blush, eyeshadow, liner, lashes, lipstick, and I was standing in front of the mirror in a black dress I had bought online, and I was honestly, genuinely happy. I looked like a woman. Not a perfect woman, not a model, but a real, believable, soft-faced woman, and I could not stop smiling. And then I heard the key in the lock. My blood turned to ice. Vikram was home, 3 hours early, and I was standing in the living room in a dress with my face done and nowhere to hide. I ran for the bathroom. I slammed the door, I locked it, and I stood there with my back against the wood, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would break my ribs. I could hear him moving around the apartment, opening the fridge, calling my name. Arjun? You home? I opened my mouth to answer, and nothing came out. And then I heard his footsteps coming toward the bathroom, and I just knew, that this was the end. This was the moment my whole secret life would come crashing down. And I was so terrified that I forgot, for one perfect, stupid second, that I was wearing a dress. I forgot that I was scared. I just stood there, in the dark, in the silence, and I waited. And then his footsteps stopped. He muttered something about the bathroom being occupied, and I heard him walk back to his room, and the door clicked shut. I slid down the wall and sat on the cold tile floor, and I cried without making a sound, half from terror and half from relief. And when I finally looked up at the mirror, at the woman with the smudged mascara and the shaking hands, I whispered to her, "We have to be more careful." And she nodded back at me, because she understood. She was the one who had been hiding with me all along. After that night, I changed everything. I stopped doing my makeup at home. I found a cheap studio space, a little room above a tailor shop, that I rented by the hour, and I did all my practice there. It was the best money I have ever spent. It gave me a place to be myself without fear, a place where no one could knock on the door, a place where I could take my time and learn. And it gave me the courage to do the thing I had been dreading for months. I decided to go outside. Not far. Not in daylight. Just a walk, at midnight, around the block, to feel the air on my face as her. I remember standing at the door of that little studio, my hand on the handle, my whole body shaking, and I asked myself the question I would ask myself 1,000 times after that. What if someone sees you? And I answer myself with the truth I would learn to live by. What if someone sees you, and it is fine? What if the world does not end? What if you are just a person walking down the street and nobody cares at all? I opened the door, and I walked. The first step outside felt like stepping off a cliff. The air hit my bare arms, and I was suddenly, horribly aware of everything: the sway of the dress, the click of my heels on the pavement, the way my hips moved when I walked, the way my shadow looked on the ground. I was sure every window was watching me, every car full of people pointing. I walked with my head down, my shoulders hunched, my heart in my throat, and I thought, this was a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life. I have to go back. And then a car passed me, slow, and I braced myself for the shout, for the insult, for the worst. But the car just drove past. And the street was quiet. And the world did not end. And I kept walking. And by the time I reached the end of the block, something strange had happened. My shoulders had relaxed. My head had come up. My steps had gotten lighter. I was still terrified, but underneath the terror, there was something else, something I had never felt before. I felt like myself. Not the version of myself I performed for my father, not the version I performed for my coworkers, not the version I performed for the world.
Just me.
Quietly, peacefully me. I walked for an hour that night. I walked until my feet ached and my heels had blisters, and I did not want to stop. And when I finally went back to the studio and looked in the mirror, I saw that I was crying and I was smiling, and I understood for the first time why people risk everything to be themselves. The first compliment came 2 weeks later, and I was not ready for it. I had gotten braver. I had started going out a little earlier, a little farther, to a late-night grocery store, to a 24-hour pharmacy, places where the lighting was bad, and the people were tired and nobody looked at anybody. And one night, at a petrol station, as I was paying for a bottle of water, the cashier, an older woman with kind eyes, looked at me and said, "That color suits you, Beta. You look lovely." I froze. I did not know what to say. I think I mumbled thank you, and I walked out of that store on legs that did not feel like my own, and I sat in my car, and I cried for 10 minutes. It was the first time in my life that a stranger had looked at me, really looked at me, and seen something worth complimenting. It was the first time I had ever been seen as her, and it had gone well. It had gone better than well. It had been kind. And I remember thinking, this is what I have been afraid of my whole life? Kindness? I could not believe it. I could not believe that the thing I had hidden in the dark for so long was something that a stranger could look at with warmth. That night I went home, and I wrote in my phone in a note I still have 3 words: "She is real." And I believed it. But the world is not all petrol stations and kind cashiers. And the night that almost broke me, the night I still have nightmares about, happened about a month later, and it taught me a lesson I wish I had never had to learn. It was late after midnight, and I was walking back to the studio from a convenience store a few blocks away. I was wearing a soft pink top and a white skirt, and I felt good. I felt safe. I had done this walk a dozen times. And then I heard the voices. A group of young men, 4 or 5 of them, coming out of a bar across the street. I did not look at them. I kept walking, head down, heart starting to pound, the old familiar fear rising in my chest. And I heard one of them say something. I did not catch the words, but I caught the tone, and I caught the laughter, and I knew, with a cold certainty, that they were talking about me. I walked faster. My heels clicked harder on the pavement. And then I heard footsteps behind me, and a voice louder now calling out, "Hey, is that a boy or a girl?" I did not answer. I kept walking. And then they were closer, and the voice said, "We are talking to you." And I stopped. I do not know why I stopped. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run. But I stopped and I turned, and I looked at them. There were 5 of them. They were young, younger than me, and they were drunk, and they were grinning, and I saw in their eyes the thing I had been afraid of my whole life, the thing I had built my entire secret around avoiding. I saw contempt. One of them stepped closer and said, "What are you, man? Are you a man in a skirt?" And the others laughed. And I stood there, in the dark, in my pink top and my white skirt, and I felt the whole world collapse around me.
I wanted to say something.
I wanted to be brave. I wanted to be the confident woman I had been practicing to become. But my voice was gone. My courage was gone. I was just a scared kid in a skirt, alone in the dark, with 5 men closing in. One of them reached out and grabbed my arm, hard, and said, "Answer me." And that is when something in me snapped. Not courage, not confidence, just pure animal terror. I wrenched my arm free, I turned, and I ran. I ran in heels, which is a skill I had never practiced and never wanted to practice, and I ran until my lungs burned and my legs shook and I could not hear their laughter anymore. I made it back to the studio. I locked the door. I slid down it and sat on the floor, shaking, crying, my makeup ruined, my skirt torn, my whole body bruised with fear. And I looked at myself in the mirror, at the woman with the smeared mascara and the wild eyes, and I hated her. I hated her so much. I hated the pink top and the white skirt and the heels that had almost gotten me killed. And I made a decision, sitting on that cold floor at 2 in the morning, that I would never, ever be her again. I would bury her. I would lock her away. I would be Arjun, the good son, the normal son, the man who had never once in his life thought about wearing a dress. And I meant it. I meant every word of it. I did not know, then, that you cannot bury a part of yourself. I did not know that the girl in the mirror does not die just because you stop looking at her. I did not know that the hardest part of this whole journey was not the fear, and it was not the danger, and it was not the world outside the door. The hardest part was the war I was about to wage against myself. The war against myself lasted 3 months, and it was the darkest time of my life. I threw away the pink top and the white skirt. I deleted the note in my phone that said she is real. I canceled the studio rental. I blocked the wig seller. I put the red lipstick from Mira's wedding in the back of a drawer under a pile of old t-shirts, and I told myself, over and over, that it was over. I told myself that the girl in the mirror had never been real, that she had been a mistake, a phase, a weakness, and that the man I was supposed to be had finally won. I went back to being Arjun, the good son, the normal son. I went to work, I smiled at my coworkers, I had dinner with my parents every Sunday, I laughed at my father's jokes, and I played the part so well that even I almost believed it. But here's the thing about burying a part of yourself. The part does not die. It does not even sleep. It just waits, in the dark, under the weight of everything you have. Piled on top of it, and it breathes, and it listens, and it waits for the moment you are weak enough to let it out again. I found myself staring at women on the street. Not the way men are supposed to stare, not with desire, but with study. I would watch the way they moved, the way they laughed, and I would think I could do that. I would catch myself in shop windows, in the dark glass of the bus, and I would look for her in my own face, and I would hate myself for looking. I stopped sleeping. I started drinking more than I should have. I pushed my friends away, because every conversation felt like a performance, and I was so tired of performing. And one night, about 3 months into the war, I came home from work, exhausted and hollow, and I opened my drawer, and I took out the red lipstick. I do not remember deciding to do it. My hand just moved. And I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, in my work clothes, in my tie, in my Arjun clothes, and I twisted the cap open, and I put it on. And I looked at myself. And I started to cry. Because the lipstick did not make me a woman. It did not make me beautiful. It just made me look like a man who was crying in lipstick, and I hated it, and I hated myself, and I hated the whole stupid world for making me feel like this. I scrubbed my lips raw again, the same way I had done the first time, and I stood there, shaking, and I asked the mirror a question I had never dared to ask out loud. What do you want? And for the first time in my life, I heard the answer. Not in words, in a feeling. A quiet, stubborn, unshakable feeling that rose up from somewhere deep inside me and said, I want to be her. Not all the time. Not instead of him. But sometimes. I want to be her sometimes. And I want to stop being ashamed of wanting it. That answer terrified me more than the attack had. Because the attack was something that had happened to me, something I could run from, something I could blame on the world. But this wanting, this was something that lived inside me, and I could not run from it, and I could not blame it on anyone, and I could not scrub it off my lips no matter how hard I tried. I sat on the bathroom floor that night, in my work clothes, in my tie, with the red lipstick lying on the tiles beside me, and I made a different kind of decision. I decided that I was going to stop running. I decided that I was going to learn to be her safely and smartly, and without shame. I decided that the men in the dark were not going to win. I decided that I was not going to bury her again. And I decided that the first thing I needed to do, the thing I had been avoiding my whole life, was to tell someone the truth. I chose Mira. Of course I chose Mira. She was the one who had given me the lipstick. She was the one who had said, whatever you want, that is the whole point. She was the only person in my life who had ever made me feel like softness was allowed. I called her on a Sunday evening, and I asked if I could come over, and she said yes, and I drove to her house with my heart in my throat, rehearsing 100 different versions of the conversation, and forgetting all of them the moment I saw her face. She made me chai, and we sat on her balcony, and she talked about her husband and her new job and her plants, and I sat there, nodding, smiling, dying inside, waiting for the right moment. And then she stopped talking, and she looked at me, really looked at me, the way she had looked at me on her wedding day, and she said, Arjun, what is wrong? And I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. And then, before I could stop myself, the words came out all at once, in a rush, like a dam breaking. I said, Mira, I like to wear dresses. I like to do my makeup. I like to look like a woman sometimes. I have been doing it for almost a year, and I have never told anyone. And I am so scared. And I am so tired. And I do not know what to do. The silence that followed was the longest silence of my life. I could hear the traffic below, the birds, the neighbor's television, the whole normal world carrying on while I sat there, exposed, waiting for my sister to decide who I was. And then Mira put down her cup and she reached across the table and she took my hand and she said, I know. I blinked. You know? She said, I have known since the wedding. I saw the way you looked at the lipstick. I saw the way you looked at yourself in the mirror when you thought nobody was watching. And I have been waiting, Arjun. I have been waiting for you to be brave enough to tell me. And I am so proud of you. I started to cry. I cried the way I had not cried since I was a child, ugly, loud, shaking sobs, and Mira held me and she did not let go, and she said, over and over, it is okay. It is okay. You are my brother and I love you and it is okay. And in that moment, sitting on my sister's balcony with her hand in mine, I understood something I had never understood before. Shame dies in the light. The thing you hide in the dark grows and grows until it is bigger than you. But the moment you say it out loud, to someone who loves you, it shrinks. It becomes small enough to hold. It becomes something you can carry instead of something that carries you. I went home that night lighter than I had been in years. And I did not know it yet, but I was about to face the hardest test of all. It happened 2 weeks later, on a Sunday at my parents' house. I had been going to visit Mira more often, and I had been feeling better, feeling almost brave, and I had made the mistake of bringing a small bag of my things, a wig and a little makeup, to practice at her place after lunch. I do not know how it happened. I must have dropped something, or left the bag open, or been careless in a way I had never been careless before. But when I came back from the kitchen, my mother was standing in the hallway, holding the bag, and her face was the color of ash. Arjun, she said, in a voice I had never heard her use before. What is this? I stood there, frozen, the whole world collapsing around me for the second time in my life. I opened my mouth, and no words came out. And behind my mother, I heard my father's footsteps coming down the stairs, and I knew, with a cold, sick certainty, that everything was about to change, and that there was no door I could lock, and no dress I could hide, and no Arjun I could pretend to be anymore. The girl in the mirror had finally stepped out into the light, and the light was my father's eyes. I have thought about that moment 1,000 times, and I have never once been able to remember it clearly. It is all fragments, like a broken mirror. My mother's hand, shaking, holding the wig. My father's face, going from confusion to understanding to something I could not name. The silence, so thick I could feel it pressing on my chest. And then my father's voice, low and flat, the voice he used right before he lost his temper, saying, "What is that?" I could not answer. My mother said, "I found it in his bag. I do not know what it is." And my father looked at me, and he said, "Arjun, explain." And I stood there in my parents' hallway, with my whole life in a bag in my mother's hands, and I did the only thing I could do. I told the truth. I said, "It is a wig, and a little makeup, and I have been wearing them, and I like it, and I am sorry, and I do not know how to explain it, and I have been so scared to tell you, and I am still scared, and I love you both. And I have never been more ashamed of myself in my entire life. And I have never been more sure that this is who I am." The silence that followed lasted an eternity. And then my father did something I did not expect. He did not shout. He did not throw the bag. He did not tell me I was sick or wrong or a disgrace. He just looked at me for a long, long time with an expression I could not read, and then he turned around and he walked back up the stairs and he closed his bedroom door. My mother stood in the hallway, holding the wig, looking at me like I was a stranger. And then she put the bag down on the table, and she said in a small, broken voice, "Eat something, Beta." And she walked into the kitchen, and I heard her crying. I stood in that hallway for a long time, alone, and I felt something I had never felt before. I felt the weight of my whole family's disappointment pressing down on me, and I understood, in that moment, why people keep secrets their whole lives. Because the truth is heavy. The truth is so heavy. And I did not know if I was strong enough to carry it.
I did not go home that night.
I could not. I drove to Mira's house and I told her everything, and she held me and she said, "It is going to be okay." And I wanted to believe her, but I could not. I stayed with her for 3 days. I did not answer my father's calls. I did not answer my mother's messages. I hid, the way I had always hidden, and I waited for the world to end. And on the 4th day, my mother called, and she said, in a voice that sounded different, softer, "Your father wants to see you. Come home on Sunday." And I said, "Is he angry?" And she said, "I do not know, but he asked for you." And that is more than I hoped for. I spent the whole week dreading that Sunday. I rehearsed 1,000 versions of the conversation. I prepared for the worst. I prepared to be disowned, to be thrown out, to be told that I was no longer their son. And then Sunday came, and I drove to my parents' house, and I sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes, too scared to get out. And finally I got out, and I walked to the door, and I knocked. My father opened the door. He looked older than I remembered. He looked tired. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he said, "Come in. We need to talk." I followed him into the living room. My mother was sitting on the sofa, her hands folded in her lap, and she would not look at me. My father sat down across from me, and he was quiet for a long time, and then he said, "I have been thinking all week. About you. About what you told us. About the things I said to you when you were growing up. About the way I raised you. And I have been angry, Arjun. Not at you. At myself. Because I have been thinking about all the times you must have been scared, and all the times you must have hidden this from me, and all the times you must have looked at me and thought that I would hate you if I knew. And I realized something. I realized that I have spent my whole life teaching you to be a man, and I never once taught you that it was okay to be afraid. I never once taught you that it was okay to be soft. I never once told you that I would love you no matter what. And I am sorry for that. I am so sorry for that." I looked at my father, this proud, hard, retired bank manager who had never once in his life shown weakness, and I saw that his eyes were wet. And I started to cry. And he stood up and he crossed the room and he put his arms around me for the first time since I was a child, and he held me and he said, "You are my son. And I love you. And I do not understand this. And I am trying. But I love you. And that is not going to change." I cried in my father's arms that day like I had not cried since I was a child. And my mother came over and she held us both and she said, "We are sorry, Beta. We are so sorry. We did not know." And I said, "It is okay. It is okay. You know now. That is all that matters." That Sunday changed everything. Not overnight, not all at once, but slowly, the way real change always happens. My father did not become a different man. He still believes that a man should stand up straight and speak loudly. But he started asking questions. He asked me what I liked about it, and I tried to explain, and he listened. He asked me if I was safe, and I told him about the night in the dark, and his face went hard, and he said, "Nobody should ever make you feel like that." And I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before. I saw protectiveness. Not for the son he thought he had, for the child he actually had. And my mother, who had always been the one to tell me to sit properly and be careful with my clothes, started to do something that surprised me more than anything.
She started to help.
She gave me an old sari of hers, one she did not wear anymore, and she said, "If you are going to do this, you should learn to do it properly."
And she taught me.
She taught me how to drape it, how to walk in it, how to sit in it, how to carry myself. And I sat on the floor of my parents' living room, in my mother's sari, while she taught me to be a woman, and I cried, and she cried, and my father pretended to read the newspaper, but I saw him watching, and I saw the smallest, softest smile on his face. The first time I went out as her after everything, after the attack and the war, and the coming out was a different experience entirely. I was not hiding. I was not terrified. I was not running. I walked down the same street where I had been attacked, in the same kind of pink top and white skirt, and I walked with my head up and my shoulders back, and I did not flinch when a car passed, and I did not flinch when a group of young men came toward me. They looked at me, and I looked back, calm, steady, and they looked away, and they kept walking, and the world did not end. And I understood, finally, that the fear had never been about them. The fear had been about me, about the part of me I had been taught to hate. And the moment I stopped hating her, the moment I started loving her, the world stopped being so terrifying. I walked for 2 hours that night, in my mother's sari, in the city where I had hidden my whole life, and I was not hiding anymore. I was living. It has been 2 years since that Sunday. 2 years since my father held me and told me he loved me. 2 years since I stopped burying her. And here is where I am now. I still work as a graphic designer. I still go to dinner at my parents' house every Sunday, and now my mother and I trade makeup tips, and my father has stopped pretending to read the newspaper when I walk in wearing a sari, and he just nods and says, "You look nice, Beta," and it is the most normal, most beautiful thing in the world. I have a small group of friends now, real friends, people who know everything about me and love me anyway. I have a little studio again, and I have built a community online, and every week I get messages from people telling me my story helped them, that they were scared too, that they thought they were alone. And I write back to every single one, because I know exactly how they feel. I was them. I was the kid hiding in the bathroom, the man scrubbing lipstick off his lips, the person who thought the truth would destroy them. And I am here to tell you from the other side of it, that it does not destroy you. It frees you. So here is what I want you to take from this, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you are hiding. The girl in the mirror was never the plan. None of this was the plan. I did not plan to fall in love with the softness. I did not plan to stand in my mother's sari and feel like myself for the first time. I did not plan to have my father hold me and tell me he loved me. But it happened.
And it changed me.
And it saved me. And I am telling you this because I want you to know that you are not broken. You are not wrong. You are not alone. The thing you are hiding, the thing you are ashamed of, it is not a weakness. It is a door. And on the other side of that door, there is a version of you that is soft and gentle and completely unafraid. She is waiting for you. And she is not a mistake. She is not a phase. She is not a joke. She is you. And you deserve to meet her. And you deserve to love her. And you deserve to let her walk in the light, with her head up and her shoulders back, in whatever she wants to wear, in whoever she wants to be. Because the world is full of people who will tell you to hide. But I am telling you from the other side of everything that the hiding is the only thing that ever hurt me. The truth never did. The truth saved me. And it can save you too. My name is Arjun. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I see a woman. And I smile at her. And she smiles back. And neither of us is hiding anymore. That is the whole point. Whatever you want. That is the whole point.